The transmission arrived on a Tuesday morning, crackling through the quantum relay stations that connected Earth to the outer colonies. Admiral Sarah Chen was reviewing patrol reports when her aide rushed into her office, face pale with urgency.
"Ma'am, you need to see this immediately," Lieutenant Morrison said, his voice barely steady.
"It's from Kepler 442b. Chen's blood turned cold.
Kepler 442b housed the research colony of New Haven, where 3,000 scientists and their families studied the planet's unique ecosystem. The colony had been radio silent for 2 weeks, which wasn't entirely unusual given the communication delays across 17 light-years. But something in Morrison's expression told her this wasn't a routine check-in. She activated the holographic display, and the image that materialized made her stomach clench. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, the colony's chief administrator, appeared before them. Her usually immaculate appearance was disheveled, her lab coat stained with something dark. Behind her, Chen could see the colony's main habitat dome, its transparent aluminum walls cracked and scorched.
"Earth Command," Hartwell's voice was hoarse, desperate. "This is New Haven Colony. We are under attack by an unknown alien species.
They appeared 3 days ago in massive ships that dwarf anything in our fleet. We tried to establish communication, but they responded with immediate violence."
The image flickered, and explosions could be heard in the background. Children were crying somewhere off-screen. "They're systematically destroying our infrastructure," Hartwell continued, her composure cracking. "But they're not just killing us quickly. They're taking people. Experimenting on them. We've found bodies, and what they've done." She paused, swallowing hard. "God help us, what they've done to our people." Another explosion rocked the transmission, and the image shook violently. When it stabilized, tears were streaming down Hartwell's face. "We're sending you all our research data, everything we've learned about them. They call themselves the Vortak Collective. They see other species as nothing more than test subjects for their biological experiments. We've counted at least 50 ships, maybe more. Their technology is centuries ahead of ours." A massive shadow fell across the habitat dome, and Hartwell looked up in terror. When she looked back at the camera, her voice was barely a whisper. "They're coming for the children next. We can hear them moving through the lower levels. Please, Earth, if there's any mercy in this universe, don't let our deaths be meaningless. Don't let them do to others what they've done to us. We tried to negotiate. We tried to surrender. They don't want surrender. They want specimens." The transmission cut to static for several seconds before Hartwell's face reappeared one final time, a strange calm having settled over her features. "Tell our families we love them. Tell them we fought until the end. And tell them that if humanity has any justice left in its soul, make these monsters pay for what they've done here. Make them." The screen went black. Chen stared at the empty display for a long moment, her hands clenched into fists. In her 30 years of military service, she had seen combat, loss, and the worst that war could offer. But this was different. This was an attack on innocence, on families, on children who had never known conflict. "Lieutenant," she said quietly, her voice carrying a steel edge that Morrison had never heard before. "Get me the President. Then, get me Admiral Rodriguez at Fleet Command. Then, contact every colony commander in human space." "Yes, ma'am. What should I tell them?" Chen turned to face him, and Morrison saw something in her eyes that made him step back involuntarily. It wasn't anger, exactly. It was something far more dangerous. "Tell them we're going to war." Within 6 hours, emergency sessions were convened across every major government on Earth. The transmission from New Haven was broadcast to every military installation, every colony, every space station in human-controlled territory. The reaction was immediate and unanimous. The Vortak had made a critical error in their assessment of humanity. They had studied human military capabilities, counted their ships, analyzed their weapons technology. What they had failed to understand was the one thing that made humanity truly dangerous: their capacity for righteous fury when those they loved were threatened. President Harrison's address to the United Nations was brief and devastating in its simplicity. The Vortak Collective has declared war on humanity through their actions at New Haven Colony. They have tortured and murdered innocent civilians, including children. They have shown no interest in negotiation, communication, or mercy. Therefore, humanity will show them none in return.
he paused, looking directly into the camera. As of this moment, every resource of the Human Federation is dedicated to one goal: the complete and total destruction of the Vortak Collective.
We will not negotiate. We will not accept surrender. We will not show mercy. They wanted to see what humans do when pushed to their absolute limit. They are about to find out. The mobilization began immediately. Every shipyard in human space was converted to military production. The massive industrial complexes that had been building generation ships and mining platforms were retooled to construct warships. The peaceful merchant marine was transformed into a logistics network that would make the ancient Mongolian horse relay look like a child's game.
But it wasn't just the official military response that marked humanity's reaction. It was the smaller things that truly revealed the species' nature.
Dr.
James Wu, a xenobiologist on Mars, abandoned his life's work studying Martian microorganisms to develop biological weapons specifically designed to target Vortak physiology based on the data from New Haven. Maria Santos, a former civilian engineer who had designed atmospheric processors, spent 72 hours straight redesigning those same processors to create toxic environments that would be lethal to Vortak but harmless to humans. Captain Tom Muller, a freight hauler who had never fired a shot in anger, used his own savings to arm his cargo ship with military-grade weaponry and volunteered for the most dangerous supply runs to the front lines.
These weren't soldiers.
These were ordinary people who had heard the crying children in that transmission and decided that some things were worth dying for.
The response wasn't limited to humans either. The Centauri Trade Federation, humanity's oldest alien allies, immediately pledged their entire fleet to the war effort. The crystalline Zephyrians, who had no love for biological entities, nevertheless offered their advanced shield technology after seeing the footage from New Haven. Even species that had previously been neutral or occasionally hostile to humans began offering support. The proud warrior race of the Kythera sent a simple message: the strong protect the weak. This is the way. We stand with humanity. Admiral Chen found herself appointed as Supreme Commander of what was quickly dubbed the Vengeance Fleet.
Standing in her new command center aboard the battleship Retribution, she watched the tactical displays showing the massive buildup of forces.
237 ships of the line. 500 support vessels. 100,000 troops. Enough firepower to level a planet. It wasn't enough. Not for what she had planned.
Admiral, her new strategic advisor, Commander Park, approached with a data tablet.
Intelligence has confirmed the location of the primary Vortak fleet.
They're moving slowly through the Kepler system, systematically destroying every human presence they encounter.
Chen nodded grimly. Casualties? 17 colonies so far.
Estimated 40,000 civilians dead or missing. The number hit Chen like a physical blow, but she forced herself to remain focused.
How long until we can engage them? At current mobilization rates, 6 weeks for the main fleet to be ready.
But, Admiral, our intelligence suggests they have over 300 ships.
Even with our allies, we're looking at fighting odds of nearly 2 to 1. Chen turned back to the tactical display, studying the red dots that represented Vortak forces.
They moved in predictable patterns, obviously confident in their technological superiority. They had no idea what was coming for them. Commander, send a message to all fleet captains. Operation Righteous Fury begins in 72 hours.
Ma'am, the fleet won't be fully assembled for 6 weeks. Chen's smile was cold enough to freeze helium. Who said anything about waiting for the full fleet?
She pointed to a cluster of green dots on the display representing the first wave of completed warships. 53 vessels, barely a quarter of their planned strength.
Under normal circumstances, sending them against the Vortak would be suicide. These weren't normal circumstances.
The Vortak think they know how humans fight, Chen said quietly. They've studied our tactics, our strategies, our conventional military doctrine.
They expect us to be cautious, to build up overwhelming force before engaging.
They expect us to fight like a civilized military. She turned to face her staff, and every officer in the room felt a chill run down their spine. They're about to learn the difference between humanity's military and humanity itself.
We're not just going to war, gentlemen. We're going hunting. The Vortak Primary Fleet Commander Zenthik was pleased with the day's harvest. The latest human settlement had yielded over 2,000 specimens, and their biological diversity continued to fascinate the collective's research scientists.
The humans' emotional responses to various stimuli were particularly interesting, especially when family groups were separated. Zenthic's chitinous form clicked against the command platform as he reviewed the day's collection reports. The humans had begged, as they always did. They had offered their technology, their resources, even their own lives in exchange for their offspring. Such primitive emotional attachments were amusing, if ultimately pointless. Commander, his tactical advisor approached, bioluminescent patches along his carapace flickering in a pattern that indicated mild concern. We're detecting unusual energy signatures on the edge of the system. Zenthic's four eyes focused on the tactical display. Several small blips had appeared at the system's heliopause, moving at velocities that suggested military vessels rather than civilian traffic. Human reinforcements, he asked, though the question was rhetorical. Human military responses were predictably slow and bureaucratic. It would be weeks before they could organize any significant counterattack. Possibly, Commander. However, the energy signatures don't match known human ship classifications. These vessels appear to be broadcasting identification codes we haven't seen before. Zenthic dismissed the concern with a wave of his primary manipulator arm. Likely new ship designs. The humans are creative in their desperation. Continue the harvest of settlement grid 77. We'll deal with whatever pathetic rescue attempt they've mounted when they arrive. He was already turning away when his advisor's bioluminescent patches flashed red, the Vortak equivalent of a startled shout. Commander! The contacts have just accelerated to 0.7 lightspeed. That got Zenthic's attention. 0.7 was beyond known human propulsion capabilities. Even Vortak ships required significant power buildup to achieve such velocities. For small vessels to reach that speed immediately suggested either a technological breakthrough or... How many contacts? Initial count shows 53 vessels, but, Commander. The advisor's voice carried a tremor that Zenthic had never heard from one of his species. They're not slowing down. On the tactical display, the approaching ships had formed into a formation that no Vortak commander would recognize. It wasn't the careful, methodical approach of a military fleet. It wasn't the hesitant advance of explorers. The human ships were arranged in what could only be described as a hunting pack formation, with smaller, faster vessels surrounding larger predators. Admiral Chen stood on the bridge of her flagship, watching the Vortak fleet grow larger on the main viewer. Intelligence reports indicated 327 enemy vessels, including 5 massive dreadnoughts that each outgunned her entire fleet. The odds were so impossibly stacked against them that any rational military commander would have waited for reinforcements. Chen had stopped being rational the moment she saw that transmission from New Haven. All ships, this is Admiral Chen, she spoke into her command communicator, her voice carrying across 53 ships filled with equally enraged humans. Today we begin humanity's response to the Vortak Collective. They wanted to see what happens when they threaten human children. They wanted to study our emotional responses to loss. She paused, watching as her fleet entered weapons range of the Vortak outer pickets. Let's show them exactly what human emotion looks like when it's armed with antimatter warheads. All ships, engage at will. No prisoners. No quarter. No mercy. The first Vortak patrol ship died before its crew realized they were under attack. The human vessel Fury of Earth dropped out of faster-than-light travel less than 10 kilometers away and fired every weapon it carried in a single devastating salvo. The alien ship simply ceased to exist, vaporized in a ball of nuclear fire. But it was what happened next that truly shocked the Vortak. Standard military doctrine in galactic warfare called for engagement at long range, careful maneuvering, and preservation of forces. The humans ignored every established rule. Their ships dove directly into the Vortak formation like rabid wolves attacking a bear. The destroyer Righteous Anger rammed a Vortak cruiser at 1/3 lightspeed, the mutual annihilation lighting up space like a new star. The frigate Memorial's Vengeance locked its navigation system on a collision course with a Vortak troop transport and ejected its entire crew in escape pod seconds before impact. Captain Lisa Park watched her crew abandon ship and felt a moment of profound sadness. Not for herself, she had volunteered to stay behind to ensure the navigation lock held, but for the fact that humans had been pushed to this point. This is Captain Park to Admiral Chen, she spoke into her communicator as her ship accelerated toward the enemy transport. Tell my daughter that mommy kept her promise. The bad aliens won't hurt any more children. The transport, loaded with human prisoners from the latest harvest, was obliterated along with the memorial's vengeance. Captain Park's sacrifice freed nearly 800 captive civilians in the most final way possible, ensuring they would never again experience Vorthack experimentation. The psychological impact on the Vorthack was immediate and devastating. They were a species that viewed warfare as a calculated exercise in resource acquisition. Death was something that happened to inferior beings, not to the superior collective. Suddenly, they found themselves fighting creatures that seemed to welcome death as long as they could take their enemies with them.
Commander Zenthik watched his tactical display in growing alarm as human ships continued to die in seemingly pointless sacrificial attacks.
But each death took out a larger Vorthack vessel, and, more importantly, each attack was perfectly coordinated with the others. "They're not attacking randomly," his tactical advisor reported, his bioluminescent patches now strobing in patterns that indicated near panic. "They're systematically targeting our troop transports and research vessels."
The realization hit Zenthik like a cold shock. The humans weren't trying to win a conventional battle.
They were trying to rescue their captured people, and they were willing to die to prevent the Vorthack from taking any more. "All ships, fall back to defensive formation Theta 7, he ordered. "Protect the research fleet at all costs." But it was already too late. The human attack had never been about engaging the Vorthack fleet. It had been about getting close enough to the research ships to do maximum damage. The heavy cruiser Humanity's Wrath had been built to fight other capital ships in long-range engagements. Captain Rodriguez had stripped out half her defensive systems and replaced them with additional antimatter storage. His ship was now essentially a flying bomb with engines. "Attention Vorthack vessels," Rodriguez broadcast on all frequencies as his ship dove toward the largest research vessel.
"You wanted to study human emotions? Study this."
The Humanity's Wrath detonated its entire antimatter storage just as it penetrated the research vessel's shields. The explosion was visible from 3 light minutes away and left nothing but expanding plasma where both ships had been.
The pattern repeated across the battlefield.
Human ships dying in massive explosions, taking with them the Vorthack vessels that contained captured civilians. It was tactical suicide, but it was also tactical genius. Within 30 minutes of the engagement beginning, the Vorthack had lost every ship carrying human prisoners and half their research fleet. They still had superior numbers, but their mission had been completely compromised. Commander Zenthik found himself facing something the Vorthack had never encountered, an enemy that considered mutual destruction a victory condition.
"Commander," his communications officer reported, "we're receiving a transmission from the remaining human fleet."
"Put it through," Zenthik ordered, curious to hear the humans beg for mercy now that their attack had failed. Admiral Chen's face appeared on his display, but there was no pleading in her expression. Instead, she wore the cold smile of a predator that had just tasted blood.
"Commander Zenthik," she said, somehow knowing his name despite never having communicated with the Vorthack before. "I hope you've enjoyed this demonstration of human military doctrine."
This was just the appetizer.
Zenthik's carapace bristled with confusion and growing dread. "Your fleet is destroyed, human.
You have no more ships in range."
Chen's smile grew wider. "You're absolutely right.
I have no more ships in range. But you made one critical error in your assessment of humanity."
"And what is that?" "You assumed that I was commanding the only fleet heading your way." New contacts appeared on the Vorthack sensors. First dozens, then hundreds.
Ships were dropping out of faster-than-light travel throughout the system, but these weren't human vessels alone.
The crystalline formations of Zephyrian warships glittered like deadly jewelry. The organic curves of Centauri battlecruisers pulsed with bioluminescent weapon systems.
The angular wedges of Kythera assault ships radiated barely controlled aggression. "You see, Commander," Chen continued, her voice carrying across space like a death sentence, "when you torture children, you don't just make enemies of their parents.
You make enemies of everyone with a functioning moral compass." The largest ship to emerge from faster-than-light travel was unlike anything in Zenthik's database.
It was clearly of human construction, but it was massive, easily dwarfing even Vorthack dreadnoughts. Along its hull, written in letters large enough to be visible from orbit, was a single word: vengeance.
"That's my real flagship," Chen said casually.
"I had it built specifically for this moment. Every weapon system was designed based on the biological data you so helpfully provided when you murdered my people.
Its shields are tuned to frequencies that disrupt Vorthack neural functions. Its weapons are loaded with viruses engineered to target your specific DNA.
Zenthik felt something he had never experienced in his 500 years of life: genuine terror.
But, here's the thing, Commander, Chen continued, her voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. I'm going to give you the same chance you gave the children of New Haven Colony. She paused, letting the implications sink in. Run.
Commander Zenthik had lived for 5 centuries, commanding Vortak fleets across a dozen galaxies. He had witnessed the collapse of civilizations, the subjugation of countless species, and the systematic harvest of entire worlds. Never in all that time had he encountered a species that made him question the fundamental superiority of the Vortak collective. The human admiral's ultimatum echoed in his consciousness as he stared at the massive fleet now surrounding his forces. 3-to-1 odds had become 5-to-1 in a matter of minutes, and more ships continued to arrive. Commander, his tactical officer's bioluminescent patterns flickered with barely controlled panic.
The humans are broadcasting something on all frequencies. Audio or visual?
Both, sir.
It appears to be music. Zenthik's mandibles clicked in confusion. Music during combat was unknown in Vortak culture. Perhaps it was some form of psychological warfare? The broadcast began with a simple melody, played on what human databases identified as a violin. Slow, mournful, heartbreaking. It was followed by other instruments joining in harmonious progression. But it wasn't the music itself that unsettled Zenthik, it was what accompanied it. Images began appearing alongside the melody. Human children laughing in playgrounds. Families sharing meals. Scientists making discoveries that would benefit all sentient life. Artists creating beauty for no purpose other than joy. The montage showed humanity at its best, its most innocent, its most hopeful.
Then, the images changed.
The burned remains of New Haven Colony. Bodies of human civilians, including children, bearing the unmistakable marks of Vortak experimentation.
The terror-filled faces of captured families as they were separated for biological testing. The final transmission from Dr. Hartwell, pleading for mercy that never came. The music swelled, no longer mournful but fierce, defiant.
The violin was joined by horns, drums, a full orchestra that seemed to voice the rage of an entire species.
And, throughout the coalition fleet, the same music played, translated into the harmonic frequencies that each allied species could understand.
The message was clear: this is who you killed. This is why we fight. This is why you will die.
Sir, the communications officer interrupted, we're receiving surrender requests from 17 of our escort vessels.
Zenthik's head snapped toward him in disbelief. Vortak did not surrender. The concept was literally absent from their language.
Yet as he watched his tactical display, he could see ships breaking formation, their weapons powering down.
Jamming frequencies, he ordered. Block those transmissions immediately. But it was too late.
The human psychological warfare had achieved something impossible. It had made Vortak feel empathy for their victims. The music, the images, the sheer emotional weight of what they had done was causing a cascade failure in Vortak military discipline.
Admiral Chen watched the enemy formation begin to collapse and felt no satisfaction.
Revenge was a cold meal, and she had lost too many good people already to take pleasure in what came next. All ships, she commanded, advance on my mark. Remember the rules of engagement: any ship that surrenders will be accepted. Any ship that continues to fight will be destroyed.
Any ship carrying human prisoners.
She paused, her voice hardening.
Any ship carrying human prisoners will be boarded and their crews will face trial for crimes against sentient life. The coalition fleet moved forward like an unstoppable tide.
But it wasn't the coordinated advance of a traditional military force. Each species fought according to its nature, yet somehow the chaos created a perfect symphony of destruction.
The Kythera ships dove straight at the enemy like metallic bullets, their warrior crews singing death songs that had been passed down for millennia.
Their weapons were crude by galactic standards, kinetic projectiles and plasma charges, but they fired them with an accuracy that bordered on the supernatural.
The crystalline Zephyrians fought like living geometry, their ships forming complex mathematical patterns that focused their energy weapons into devastating focal points.
Where they concentrated their fire, Vortak ships didn't just die, they were reduced to their component atoms. The Centauri vessels moved like graceful predators, their bioluminescent hulls pulsing in patterns that confused Vortak targeting systems. Their weapons were alive, guided organisms that sought out enemy weaknesses with the persistence of viruses. But it was the human ships that truly terrified the Vortak. Human military doctrine had been completely rewritten in the 6 weeks since New Haven. Gone were the careful, methodical tactics taught in military academies. Instead, humanity fought with the desperate creativity of a species that had nothing left to lose.
The destroyer Orphan's Cry had been designed as a standard escort vessel.
Captain Williams had modified it by removing the crew quarters and replacing them with automated systems and additional weapons. His ship now operated with a crew of 3 instead of the normal 50, allowing him to take risks that would be unthinkable with more lives at stake. Williams brought his ship alongside a Vortak heavy cruiser and began firing point-blank into its shields. The enemy ship returned fire, but Williams had already calculated that his smaller vessel could absorb more proportional damage before critical systems failed. Orphan's Cry to any ship in range, Williams broadcast as his shields failed and his hull began to buckle.
We've weakened their primary shields. Someone finish what we started. The Centauri vessel flowing current responded immediately, its bioluminescent weapons piercing through the damaged shields and crippling the Vortak ship's engines.
Within minutes, a Kythera boarding party had taken control and was securing evidence of the atrocities committed aboard. This pattern repeated throughout the engagement. Human ships serving as shield breakers, drawing fire and absorbing damage so that their allies could deliver killing blows. It was mathematically inefficient, tactically insane, and absolutely devastating to Vortak morale.
Commander Zenthik realized that he was witnessing something unprecedented in galactic history, a coalition of species so enraged by Vortak actions that they were willing to die for each other.
The humans had somehow convinced dozens of civilizations to fight as if the survival of their own children depended on the outcome.
Sir, his tactical officer reported, the flagship Endless Harvest is requesting permission to withdraw.
Zenthik turned to stare at him.
The Endless Harvest was their largest research vessel, commanded by senior researcher Kethfor, one of the most respected scientists in the collective. If Kethfor was requesting withdrawal, the battle was truly lost. Denied, Zenthik replied automatically.
Sir, the senior researcher specifically requested to speak with you directly.
Against his better judgment, Zenthik opened the communication channel. Kethvor's image appeared, but the confident scientist Zenthik knew was gone.
In his place was something Zenthik had never seen, a broken Vortak. Commander, Kethvor began, his voice barely a whisper, I need to withdraw my ship immediately.
Explain. The humans, what they showed us. I've spent 3 centuries conducting biological research on inferior species. I thought I was advancing the cause of scientific knowledge. But, seeing those images, hearing their emotional responses. Kethvor's carapace shuddered, a physical reaction Zenthik had never witnessed in his species. Commander, I've been torturing sentient beings. We all have. Those humans we captured from New Haven, they weren't specimens. They were people. They had families, hopes, dreams. And we. The transmission cut off abruptly.
On Zenthik's tactical display, the Endless Harvest was powering down all weapons and broadcasting a surrender signal in 17 different languages. Throughout the Vortak fleet, the same scene was playing out. Scientists, soldiers, even commanders were having the same realization, they had become monsters, and the humans were showing them exactly what they had lost.
But not all Vortak were capable of such self-reflection.
The dreadnought Infinite Cruelty, commanded by war leader Thresh-Kol, responded to the psychological warfare by increasing the brutality of their attacks. If the humans wanted to see emotion, Thresh-Kol would show them the pain of watching their allies die. The Infinite Cruelty targeted the human hospital ship Mercy's Light, which was attempting to recover escape pods from disabled vessels.
The massive alien dreadnought's weapons could destroy the medical vessel with a single salvo.
Captain Maria Santos commanded the frigate New Dawn, one of the smallest ships in the human fleet. Her vessel was designed for reconnaissance, not combat, and carried only light weapons that couldn't scratch a dreadnought's armor. But she was also the daughter of immigrants who had fled to the colonies to escape persecution, and she understood exactly what the Vortak represented. New Dawn to all ships, Santos broadcast as she changed course toward the Infinite Cruelty.
I'm going to ram that monster. Clear the area and make sure you get good footage for the history books.
Negative, New Dawn, Admiral Chen's voice cut through the communication channel.
Stand down immediately. With respect, Admiral, Santos replied, I've got a better idea.
Instead of accelerating toward the dreadnought, Santos brought her ship alongside and began broadcasting on every frequency the Vortac monitored. But she wasn't transmitting surrender terms or military communications. She was broadcasting her childhood memories.
Growing up in the New Eden colony.
Her first day of school. Learning to ride a hoverbike with her father teaching her. Family dinners where her grandmother would tell stories of the old country. Her graduation from the Space Academy. The letter she had written to her parents the night before shipping out, promising them she would come home. "This is Captain Maria Santos of the Human Federation frigate New Dawn," she said, her voice carrying across space to every ship in both fleets.
"My name is Maria Elena Santos. I am 28 years old. I like chocolate ice cream and old movies, and I wanted to be a teacher before I became a soldier. I have a cat named Mr. Whiskers who is currently being cared for by my neighbor Mrs. Patterson." The Infinite Cruelty's weapons were tracking toward her ship, but Santos continued broadcasting. "I am going to die in approximately 30 seconds, killed by creatures who see me as nothing more than a biological curiosity. But, before I die, I want every being listening to this transmission to understand something: I am not a specimen. I am not a resource to be harvested. I am a person, with hopes and dreams and people who love me." Her voice broke slightly, but she continued. "And the children you murdered on New Haven? They were people too. Every single one of them."
The Infinite Cruelty fired.
But the shot never reached the New Dawn.
The massive Zephyrian dreadnought crystal of eternal light had materialized between the two ships, its crystalline hull absorbing the full force of the Vortac weapons. The elegant alien vessel shattered like glass, but its sacrifice gave the Coalition fleet the opening they needed. Every gun in the Allied fleet turned toward the Infinite Cruelty. War Leader Thresh had perhaps 3 seconds to realize what his brutality had cost him before his ship was reduced to cosmic dust by the concentrated fire of 50 different weapon systems.
In that moment, Commander Zenthik understood that the Vortac had not just lost a battle.
They had lost their right to exist as a civilization. The humans hadn't just defeated them militarily, they had exposed the moral bankruptcy at the core of Vortac society. And there would be no mercy for what they had become. The silence that followed the destruction of the Infinite Cruelty lasted exactly 12 seconds. Then, across the battlefield, something unprecedented happened in the history of galactic warfare. The victors began to mourn their enemies. Captain Santos sat in her command chair, staring at the expanding cloud of debris that had once been both War Leader Threshcole's dreadnought and the Zephyrian vessel that had died to save her. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction. Only a profound sadness that thinking beings had forced each other to this point. "New dawn to crystal of eternal light," she broadcast, knowing there could be no response.
"Thank you." Throughout the Coalition fleet, similar scenes played out. Kythera warriors, bred for combat and conquest, found themselves offering prayers for fallen enemies. Centauri commanders, whose species had evolved beyond physical violence, wept bioluminescent tears for the necessity of what they had done. But it was the human response that defined the moment. Admiral Chan activated fleet-wide communications, her voice carrying to every ship in both armadas. "All vessels, cease fire. All vessels, prepare to receive surrender." Commander Zenthik could barely process what he was hearing. His fleet was in ruins, more than half his ships disabled or destroyed, and the humans were offering quarter? "This is Admiral Chan to Commander Zenthik." The human's voice was calm, professional, empty of the rage that had driven her earlier actions. "I am prepared to accept the unconditional surrender of your remaining forces. Your wounded will receive medical attention. Your crews will be treated according to the Galactic Convention on Prisoners of War." Zenthik's mandibles clicked in confusion. Why? The question was broadcast before he could stop himself, heard across both fleets. Why show mercy to creatures who had shown none? Why offer quarter to monsters? Chen's answer came slowly, as if she was carefully considering each word. "Because, Commander, someone has to remember what we're fighting to preserve. We're not fighting to become like you. We're fighting to ensure that what you represent never happens again." She paused, and, when she continued, her voice carried a weight that seemed to compress space itself. "The children of New Haven are dead. Dr. Hartwell and her researchers are dead. Nothing we do here will bring them back. But how we proceed from this moment will define whether their deaths had meaning." Across the Vortac fleet, surrender signals began appearing.
One by one, then, in groups, the remaining alien vessels powered down their weapons and accepted the human.